Good morning. If we could ask delegations to make their way to their seats, we'll be beginning in just a few minutes. If delegations could kindly make your way to your seats, we'll begin in just a few minutes. Thank you. If delegations can kindly make your way to your seats, we'll begin momentarily.
I call to order the second meeting of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women.
You need to shout.
Please take your seats immediately.
Gracias.
I call to order the second meeting of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. Your Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished heads of state and government, ministers, excellencies, distinguished delegates. At the outset, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all of you. I am pleased to see you in this hall this morning. Before proceeding to hear opening statements, I invite the Commission to consider a number of organizational and procedural matters. I first invite the Commission to consider Agenda Item 1, Election of Officers. The Commission will recall that at the first meeting of its 68th session, the Commission elected me as Chair and Her Excellency Maria del Carmen Squef of Argentina and Mr. Maris Burbergs of Latvia as Vice Chairs of the Commission at its 68th session. I wish to advise the Commission that the group of Western European and other states endorsed the candidature of Her Excellency Joka Brand, Permanent Representative of the Kingdom of the Netherlands, as Vice Chair of the Commission at its 68th and 69th sessions. The group of African states endorsed the candidature of Ms. Dunia Pires de Canto of Cabo Verde as Vice Chair of the Commission at its 68th and 69th sessions. Following the completion of the tour of duty in New York of Her Excellency Maria del Carmen Squef of Argentina, the chair of the group of Latin American and Caribbean states informed the Commission that Ms. Maria Florencia Gonzalez of Argentina would complete the remainder of the term as Vice Chair of the Commission at its 68th session. In the absence of any other candidates, may I take it that the Commission wishes to elect, by acclamation, Her Excellency Joka Brand of the Kingdom of the Netherlands and Ms. Dunia Pires de Canto of Cabo Verde as Vice Chairs of the Commission at its 68th and 69th sessions, and Ms. Maria Florencia Gonzalez of Argentina as Vice Chair of the Commission at its 68th session. I hear no objection, so it is so decided. I warmly congratulate the newly elected vice chairs. I would like to take this opportunity to thank my fellow Bureau members for their hard work and excellent support throughout the preparations for the current session. I would like to inform the Commission that following consultations with the Bureau, it has been agreed to designate Ms. Dunia Pires de Canto of Cabo Verde as Rapporteur for the 68th session. I congratulate Ms. Pires de Canto on her appointment. I now invite the Commission to appoint members of the Working Group on Communications on the Status of Women in accordance with the provisions of ECOSOC Resolution 1983/27. In accordance with the provisions of ECOSOC Resolution 1983/27, the Council authorized the Commission to appoint a working group consisting of not more than 5 of its members, selected with due regard for geographical distribution, to meet in closed meetings during each session of the Commission. I recall that at its 67th session, the Commission elected Morocco to serve as a member of the working group at the 67th and 68th sessions of the Commission. I have been informed of the following candidatures. The group of Western European and other states has endorsed the candidature of Spain to serve as a member of the working group at its 68th and 69th sessions. The group of Asian Pacific states has endorsed the candidature of Saudi Arabia to serve as member of the working group at its 68th session. And the nomination of Ukraine was received to serve as a member of the working group for the group of Eastern European states at the 68th and 69th sessions of the Commission. May I take it that the Commission wishes to appoint Saudi Arabia to serve on the working group on communications on the status of women at the Commission's 68th session, and Spain and Ukraine to serve on the working group at the 68th and 69th sessions of the Commission? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I now invite the Commission to turn its attention to Item 2, adoption of the agenda and other organizational matters. The Commission will first consider its provisional agenda for the session as contained in document E/CN.6/2024/1. The provisional agenda and documentation for the 68th session were approved by the Economic and Social Council in its decision 2023/326. Are there any comments on the provisional agenda? May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the provisional agenda as contained in document E/CN.6/2024/1? I hear no objection. It is so decided. I now invite the Commission to turn to its proposed organization of work as contained in document E/CN.6/2024/1/Addendum 1. In accordance with past practice, I would like to propose the following time limits for statements in the general discussion. Statements on behalf of groups shall not exceed 10 minutes. Statements by individual delegations shall not exceed 5 minutes. Statements by intergovernmental organizations and entities of the United Nations system shall not exceed 5 minutes. Statements by non-governmental organizations shall not exceed 3 minutes. As regards the ministerial roundtables, delegations are advised that statements made by ministers should not exceed 3 minutes. If speakers continue beyond the time limit, the microphone or video will be automatically muted. May I take it that the Commission wishes to approve the draft organization of work as contained in document E/CN.6/2024/1/Addendum 1, on the understanding that further adjustments may be made as warranted during the course of the session. I hear no objections. It is so decided. Following informal consultations with the Bureau, I would like to propose the following draft oral decisions. The first decision is as follows. Having received a request by the Cook Islands to participate in the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, the Commission decides, without setting a precedent for its future sessions, that the Cook Islands may participate in the current session of the Commission in accordance with Rule 69 of the Rules of Procedure of the Functional Commissions of the Economic and Social Council, which provides that, and I quote, "The Commission shall invite any member of the United Nations that is not a member of the Commission and any other state to participate in its deliberations on any matter of particular concern to that state." Close quotes. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the draft oral decision that I just read out? I hear no objection. It is so decided. The second decision reads as follows. The Commission decides, without setting a precedent for future sessions of the Commission on the Status of Women, that member states, observer states, intergovernmental organizations, as well as specialized agencies, related organizations, and civil society organizations may submit a pre-recorded statement which will be played in the conference room during the general discussion of the Commission on the Status of Women at its 68th session. May I take it that the Commission wishes to adopt the draft oral decision that I just read out? I hear no objection. It is so decided. As previously advised, I would like to recall that statements in the ministerial roundtables will be in person only. The Commission will now proceed to hear opening statements. Your Excellency Antonio Gutierrez, Secretary General of the United Nations, distinguished heads of state and governments, ministers, excellencies, distinguished guests, distinguished delegates, friends from civil society, ladies and gentlemen. It is my great pleasure to welcome you to the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. I welcome and appreciate everyone present here in the General Assembly Hall, as well as the thousands following us virtually across the globe. I am honored to be entrusted with the responsibility of chairing the Commission on the Status of Women this year. But first, I wish to take a moment of reflection to remember and express my solidarity with all women and girls in conflict situations. Our thoughts are with you as we strive for peace. For the next 2 weeks, the Commission will consider the priority theme, accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective. This theme is crucial and timely. The issues that we will be considering and discussing are very real issues that women and girls are encountering every day. The Commission will also evaluate the progress in the implementation of agreed conclusions from its 63rd session on social protection systems, access to public services and sustainable infrastructure for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. In addition, the Commission will consider an emerging issue, that is, artificial intelligence to advance gender equality, challenges and opportunities. Similar to last year, the Commission will also have a youth segment to enable young people to share their insights on the priority theme. Due to austerity measures recently implemented by the UN Secretariat, all meetings will end at 6 p.m. sharp. I therefore encourage you to keep all interventions short and focused on the priority and review themes. There is a rich and varied program of side events and other parallel events organized by member states, intergovernmental organizations, UN entities, and civil society throughout the 2 weeks. These events will offer a space for exchange of good practices and multi-stakeholder engagement, and I encourage everyone to actively participate. Excellencies, dear friends, we are meeting today at a critical time for the lives and livelihoods of women and girls. The challenges to fulfill their rights and needs are unprecedented in scale and complexity. Foremost among these is their fundamental right to a life of safety, dignity, and prosperity. More than 400 million women and girls currently living in extreme poverty are being denied this fundamental right. These women bear a heavy and disproportionate burden due to the multiple crises that our world is currently grappling with, including the climate crisis, food shortages, debt crisis, and escalating conflicts. If the present trends persist, it is projected that by 2030, approximately 8% of women globally will continue to subsist on less than $2.15 per day. This situation not only jeopardizes our collective commitment to achieve gender equality and leave no one behind, but also poses a significant obstacle to the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. It is our shared responsibility to eradicate women's and girls' poverty and address all the barriers that are standing in the way. These barriers include the ability of the financial systems and institutions to provide sufficient funding, capacities, and accountability so that women's and girls' poverty is recognized, understood, and effectively addressed. Achieving gender equality, poverty eradication, and inclusive growth require adequate fiscal space. Making the economy deliver better for everyone needs efficient and accountable public financial institutions that use a gender lens on how they allocate resources. Private capital also has a role in financing for gender equality. I am pleased to note the engagement of various private sector entities in this session. Women and girls across the world are looking up to the Commission as the leading intergovernmental body on gender equality and the empowerment of women for concrete and meaningful, action-oriented policy recommendations and commitments that put gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls at the center of poverty eradication and gender equality financing. This year, 6 years before the 2030 deadline, the Commission has an opportunity to advance the global normative agenda and global consensus on the critical topic before it, which is crucial to accelerating the achievement of the 2030 agenda. The discussions of the Commission will also contribute to the upcoming Summit of the Future later this year, as well as the financing for development in 2025. We cannot waste this opportunity as we look ahead to the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and its echoing call that women's rights are human rights. We can only make this a reality by mobilizing all stakeholders across member states, UN entities, civil society, and all other sectors. I look forward to a fruitful and ambitious session with the end result of concrete actions which demonstrably impact the lives of all women and girls everywhere. I thank you. I now invite the Secretary General of the United Nations, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, to address the Commission. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, dear friends. It is always a pleasure to address the Commission on the Status of Women, the preeminent global body dedicated to promoting the rights of women and girls. Progress on women's rights has overwhelmingly come from civil society and women's rights organizations. I've seen it myself in every corner of the world. And I've seen how that progress benefits all our communities and societies. So thank you for everything you do. Excellencies, dear friends, our world is going through turbulent times and women and girls are being hit hard. In conflict zones around the globe, women and girls are suffering most from wars waged by men. Today is the first day of Ramadan, a time of compassion, reflection, and understanding. I'm appalled and outraged that conflict is continuing in Gaza during these holy months. Families seeking shelter from Israel bombardment are struggling to survive as hunger and malnutrition take hold. This is heartbreaking and utterly unacceptable. Once again, I call for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, the unconditional release of all hostages, and a massive increase in humanitarian aid. In a statement to the press this morning, I stressed the need, at the very least, for a cessation of hostilities and release of hostages during the holy months of Ramadan. Last week, I made a similar appeal for a cessation of hostilities in Sudan. In the spirit of Ramadan, I appeal to all those involved in conflict everywhere to silence the guns and return to the peace table. Excellencies, dear friends, around the world, conflict and crises are increasing with a devastating impact on women and girls. In Afghanistan, the Taliban has issued more than 50 edicts suppressing women's and girls' rights. In Sudan, scores of women have reportedly been subjected to rape and other forms of sexual violence in the ongoing conflict. In Israel, there are horrific accounts in the report by my special representative, Pramila Patten, of sexual violence against women and girls and indications of sexualized torture during the terror attacks launched by Hamas and other armed groups on 7 October. The report also includes shocking testimonies of sexual violence against Palestinian women in detention settings, house raids, and checkpoints in the occupied Palestinian territory. And more than 2/3 of the tens of thousands of people killed and injured during Israel's military operations in Gaza are reportedly women and children. Meanwhile, despite evidence that women's full participation makes peace-building much more effective, the number of women in decision-making roles is actually falling. Women were virtually absent from talks on ending the conflicts in Ethiopia, Sudan, Myanmar, and Libya. The facts are clear. Women lead to peace. Budgets and policies must follow, with ambitious targets for women's participation and urgent investments in women's peace-building. Excellencies, dear friends, many women and girls are also facing a war on their fundamental rights at home and in their communities. Hard-fought progress is being reversed. Women's rights are fundamentally a question of power, and I see two deeply worrying trends. First, despite enormous progress that all of you have helped realize, the patriarchy is far from vanquished. It is regaining ground. Autocrats and populists are attacking women's freedoms and their sexual and reproductive rights. They promote what they call traditional values. And patriarchy is indeed an age-old tradition. Discrimination against women goes back millennia, and we don't want to bring it back. We want to turn it back. We cannot accept a world in which grandmothers fear their granddaughters will enjoy fewer rights than they had. We must speak out loud and clear, not on our watch. At the same time, I see another worrying trend in power relations over the coming decades in the digital technologies. Those technologies, and particularly artificial intelligence, are today dominated by men as leaders and at the technical level. There is a mountain of evidence that when systems are designed by men, they result in biased algorithms. Women's needs, women's bodies, and women's fundamental rights are ignored. Male-dominated algorithms could literally program inequalities into activities from urban planning to credit ratings to medical imaging for years to come. This endangers men and boys as well as women and girls. It's time for governments, civil society, and the Silicon Valleys of the world to join a massive effort to bridge the digital gender divide and ensure women have decision-making roles in digital technology at all levels. This is one of the main goals of the Global Digital Compact that will be central to the Summit of the Future in September. Excellencies, dear friends, your gathering this year is focused on how tackling poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective are critical to accelerate gender equality. The reason is simple. Globally, poverty has a female face. Women have less access to land, natural resources, and financial assets. They suffer the impacts of climate change more than men, and they are more likely to be food insecure. The International Labour Organization estimates that worldwide, women as an average earn just 51% for every dollar earned by a man. Economic sectors dominated by women are undervalued, underpaid, and even in some cases, unpaid. Women's invisible domestic labor is a subsidy to the entire economy. And meanwhile, the violence that is a pervasive feature of many women's lives can feed a vicious cycle. Poverty intensifies the risks of violence, and violence makes women poorer. This is simply unacceptable. At the global level, we are failing to invest in women and girls. And the continuing impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, mounting debt, climate-related disasters, and an ongoing cost of living crisis are all shrinking the pie even more. We will not solve today's challenges by relying on a global financial system that helps perpetuate inequality. And I'm therefore calling for an SDG stimulus that would provide $500 billion annually in affordable long-term finance for developing countries. The proposal includes a debt lifeline to create breathing space for countries facing impossible repayment schedules. Leaders endorsed the stimulus at last year's SDG Summit, and I urge all countries to support these efforts to increase the investments that will achieve SDG 5 on gender equality and turbocharge progress across the entire 2030 agenda. And I count on government support for deep reform of the international financial architecture at the Summit of the Future in September, so that it reflects today's global economy and meets the financial needs of developing countries, enabling them to invest in equality and opportunity for women and girls. Excellences,
Excellencies, dear friends, at the national level, governments have a responsibility to invest in ending poverty and achieving inclusive, sustainable development for all. That takes budgets and taxes that address the specific needs of women and girls living in poverty. It takes policies that drive women's full economic participation and empowerment through decent work, training, upgrading skills, accessible public services, and social protection. Governments must recognize the key economic role of unpaid care work, with policies that support both mothers and fathers to take paid work outside the home. They should ensure that their climate policies, including a just and equitable transition to renewable energy, boost employment opportunities for women and improve access to goods and services for women and girls. And they must do more to prevent the global scourge of violence against women and girls and end the abomination of female genital mutilation. Equal rights for women and girls depend on ending violence and abuse against them. Excellencies, dear friends, accelerating gender equality by tackling poverty requires women's full representation and leadership of financial institutions. More than 8 out of 10 finance ministers are men. More than 9 out of 10 central bank governors are men. Overwhelmingly male-dominated financial institutions need to dismantle the structural barriers that are blocking women from leadership roles. Business as usual is business dominated by men. But change doesn't just happen. We did not achieve gender parity at senior levels of the United Nations by accident. We did it with a determined effort to change our culture and welcome women into leadership roles. And that effort produced results. We achieved full gender parity among senior management and UN leaders around the world for the first time in history. If the United Nations can do it, governments can do it, banks can do it, and everyone must do it.
À travers le système.
Across the UN system, the representation of women in the professional and higher categories is at a historic high. We are pursuing full gender parity at all levels and in each and every entity, prioritizing areas where progress is slow, especially our field missions. And we are supporting the fight for equality far beyond our own organization. On International Women's Day, I launched the United Nations System-Wide Gender Equality Acceleration Plan. This commits to placing women and girls in the center of all of our work, to opening financing opportunities for grassroots women's organizations, and to working with member states for an ambitious revitalization of the Commission on the Status of Women, your commission. Excellencies, dear friends, the Commission on the Status of Women is a catalyst for the transformation we need. At this difficult and divided moment, let us work together to end poverty in all its dimensions. Let's do it by investing in women and girls, betting on women and girls, and pushing for peace and dignity for women and girls everywhere in the world. Thank you.
I thank the Secretary General for his statement, and I now invite the Commission to hear a statement by the President of the General Assembly, His Excellency Dennis Francis.
Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Manuel Rivera Lagdameo, Chair of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, Mr. Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It is my distinct pleasure to address you all today at this opening of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. The annual CSW session is always momentous, as the United Nations headquarters complex pulsates with the energy of thousands of dynamic participants, comprising heads of state and government, ministers, senior government officials, stakeholders, influencers, and advocates from around the globe come together to promote gender equality and women's empowerment. Over the 2 weeks ahead, I am confident that your discussions will reignite meaningful dialogue worldwide, thus bringing us closer to breaking down the barriers that hinder women's full enjoyment of their rights and impede our collective objective of achieving gender equality and women's empowerment. Excellencies, this year's priority theme, which highlights the crucial link between eradicating poverty and the achievement of gender equality through financing with a gender perspective and the strengthening of institutions, is extremely important as it underlines the urgency of the need to intensify our efforts. Despite being halfway through the 2030 agenda, regrettably, we are woefully lagging in our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly SDG 1, the goal of which is to eradicate extreme poverty. Currently, 1 in every 10 women lives in extreme poverty. I repeat, 1 in every 10 women. If we continue on a business-as-usual path, over 340 million women and girls will still languish in extreme poverty by 2030. To reverse this undesirable trajectory, we need to adopt a multidimensional approach, one that should include, among other measures, equal access to resources and services such as land, healthcare, family planning, education, and the labor market. Social protection policies that are gender responsive. Measures to end the gender-based discrimination impeding women's leadership and equal participation in decision-making in all spheres of life. In this regard, we must draw our inspiration from the exemplary women who overcame significant barriers and obstacles through their resilience, determination, ingenuity, and grit. Women such as Azhar Riati, a Jordanian mother of 6, whose first job outside the home was at the UN Women's Oasis Center program, a lifeline for over 30,000 primarily Syrian refugees and vulnerable Jordanian women and their families. Through this program, Azhar acquired tailoring skills, which she now uses to earn an income. And Evangenia from Ukraine, a former art school teacher who fled to Moldova following Russia's full-scale invasion. In Moldova, she joined a community of over 100,000 Ukrainian refugees, predominantly women and girls, and established her own art business. She honed her entrepreneurial abilities through the She Leads project, which is active in 6 regions of Moldova and offers 10-day courses in business and entrepreneurial skills facilitated by UN Women and its partners. In addition to her business, Evangenia also volunteers as a teacher in arts and crafts to children in refugee camps. Reflecting on the experiences of these and many other remarkable women adds a humanistic dimension to the often abstract data and narratives. Inspired and motivated by their resilience, we are reminded of our obligation to support the millions of women and girls worldwide who seek and deserve the same rights and opportunities as men and boys to reach their full potential. Excellencies, honorable ministers, the perennial underfunding in gender equality projects and programs not only undermines but significantly reverses any progress we have achieved. It is evident that current bilateral funding allocated for gender equality, while somewhat beneficial, is inconsistent and insufficient. To achieve real gender equality in critical sectors, an estimated $6.4 trillion annually is required in 48 developing countries, which accounts for nearly 70% of the developing world's population. We must therefore acknowledge that enhanced international cooperation is crucial, particularly in the provision of financial assistance that would allow for predictable allocation of resources to meet gender-specific needs. I urge you all, CSW attendees, to build and strengthen partnerships that result in actionable steps at the national, regional, and international levels, always keeping in mind that empowering women and girls yields a far-reaching dividend for humanity, drives transformative development, and propels progress towards sustainable development. Excellencies, we convene at a time when the prevalence of gender-based violence is alarming globally, with conflict zones being particularly worrisome. The time for action is now, not tomorrow, not next week, but now. I am deeply distressed by reports of sexual abuse targeting women and girls in Palestine, Ukraine, Haiti, and other places in the world, including the reports of the UN Special Representative on Sexual Violence in Conflict, which indicated that there is credible evidence of rape and sexualized torture committed against women and girls by Hamas during and subsequent to the October 7th attacks, with reasonable grounds to believe that such abuses are still ongoing. Such gratuitous and flagrant violence, often with impunity, highlights the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and the profound global failure to prevent violence and sexual violence targeting them. It is urgent that we do more, much more, to prevent these atrocities, and when proven on an evidentiary basis, to punish the perpetrators. Rest assured of my steadfast dedication and unwavering commitment as President of the General Assembly to gender equality and the empowerment of women. I will continue to work with my Special Advisor on Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment, as well as my Advisory Board on Gender Equality, to facilitate astute analysis and expert guidance on this important matter, with a view to ensure mainstreaming of a gender perspective across priorities of my presidency and the overall work of the General Assembly. Just last week, in conjunction with the permanent mission of Iceland to the United Nations, I convened a very successful frank, and eye-opening barbershop discussion with a group of male ambassadors and permanent representatives. This special edition of my morning GAIAP dialogues aimed to reflect on the role of men as agents of change in global efforts to achieve gender equality and the empowerment of our women. As I look around this hall, it is evident that meaningful progress on gender equality requires that we involve men more in our discussions on gender issues. To that end, I encourage each of you to include more male representatives in your national delegations to future sessions of the CSW. I am also looking forward with anticipation to engaging with you on various topics over the next 2 weeks, including ways to close the gender education gap and enhancing women's financial inclusion. And I look forward to the adoption of a concise, action-oriented, and implementable agreed conclusion encapsulating our unity of purpose. As we set our sights on the summit of the future, we have a unique opportunity to prioritize gender equality in our efforts to strengthen our beleaguered multilateral system. And intergovernmental negotiations on the Global Digital Compact and the Declaration on Future Generations also offer additional opportunities to ensure that digital transformation equally benefits women and girls and unlocks the full potential of future generations, thus contributing to a sustainable future for all. I urge you to seize these key impending opportunities to keep gender equality at the forefront of our vision for a prosperous shared future. Excellencies, honorable ministers, let me leave you with a familiar, though important message, namely that with power comes responsibility. You, particularly the decision makers, are especially well positioned to use your influence in the next 2 weeks to drive lasting, impactful, and positive change for women and girls. I have complete confidence in your unwavering commitment and capabilities. The CSW has a proven track record of convening power and of overcoming substantial challenges. I am confident that your collaborative engagement will make this session a successful and impactful one. I thank you.
I thank the President of the General Assembly for his statement. I now invite the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council, His Excellency Ivan Simonovic of Croatia, to deliver a statement on behalf of the President of ECOSOC, Her Excellency Paula Narvaez.
Mr. Secretary General, Mr. President of General Assembly, Mr. Chair of CSW, distinguished government and civil society representatives. It is my great pleasure to address you today at the opening of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, a cornerstone in our collective journey towards a more equitable world where gender equality is not just an aspiration, but a reality. The President of ECOSOC, Ms. Paula Narvaez Ojeda, wanted very much to join us today, but unfortunately had to fly to Chile due to a family emergency. So instead of the female president, you are getting the male vice president, adding to the gender disbalance of this opening. However, I will do my very best to support CSW in its strengthening as she wanted. The CSW is a powerful tool for bolstering global standards for gender equality, empowering women and girls, and eliminating discrimination and violence against them, as well as expediting the implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. Given the multiple crises upon us, including conflicts that especially affect women and girls and often involve sexual violence against them, it is our collective duty to navigate these challenges while advancing the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals in a manner that is responsive to the needs of women and girls. And yet, the state of progress towards achieving SDGs remain slow, and the gender outcomes across all the SDGs are concerning. As the 2023 Gender Snapshot tells us, globally, no SDG 5 indicator is at the target met or almost met level. In 2023, 1 in every 10 women was living in extreme poverty, and under current trends, an estimated 342 million women and girls will still be living on less than $2.15 a day by 2030. Under worst-case climate scenario, up to 158 million more women and girls could be pushed into poverty due to climate change, with as many as 236 million more women and girls projected to be food insecure. If current insufficient investment trends in gender equality persist, there will be a shortfall of $360 billion per year, with costs rising every day. Excellencies, we must do more and better for women and girls. Achieving sustainable development will require simultaneous acting on long-standing gender disparities, while looking ahead to the implementation of progressive and responsive gender-sensitive policies. This includes enhancing access to land, healthcare, social protection, education, and labor market. It means safeguarding sexual and reproductive health and rights, addressing economic disparities, and strengthening political and legal representation. It will require us to reduce institutional barriers and expand women's participation in leadership and decision-making, while scaling up the needed investment. And it will require us to bring all stakeholders, including civil society, to the table to ensure the sustainability of our efforts. Beyond the metrics, it is important to recognize that issues such as poverty and the lack of access to financing for gender-responsive politics manifest in the life of women with real and detrimental consequences to their well-being, particularly for those in vulnerable situations. We must ensure that this session of CSW contributes to reversing the negative trends, including for women living in developing countries. Gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls must be prioritized across all the SDGs. Ladies and gentlemen, this year's priority theme of the Commission provides great opportunity to address the gaps in the intersection of the implementation of SDG 1 and SDG 5. Accelerating the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective is timely and intersects with all 8 Council's priorities for the year. To fully utilize such an opportunity requires political will, technical expertise, and decisive action to break the silos between gender, equality, development, and human rights. It is particularly relevant to address gaps in the international financial architecture and support the Secretary General's SDG stimulus. The transformative policy guidance of the CSW will significantly contribute to the work of the Council, including the FFD Forum and HLPF, and to the Summit of the Future in September. We must recognize that CSW, as well as gender architecture in general, has a long way to go in order to ensure the full equal participation of women and girls in public life, the eradication of all forms of violence against them, and the achievement of Beijing Plan of Action and SDGs. To advance along this remaining lengthy path, we issue a call today from the Presidency of ECOSOC to create a task force that can work to suggest improvements to the CSW procedures within the ECOSOC membership, making it more efficient, implementation-oriented, and integrated with the women's agenda discussed in the multilateral system. I assure you of ECOSOC's unwavering support throughout the CSW to identify and implement timely and high-impact solutions to advance progress for women and girls everywhere. I look forward to the outcomes of these important discussions and to your continued engagement throughout the work of the Council. Thank you, and I wish you successful deliberations.
I thank the Vice President of the Economic and Social Council for his statement. I now invite the Administrator of the United Nations Development Program, Mr. Akim Steiner, to make a statement.
Chair of the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, Mr. Secretary General, Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and colleagues. I'm very conscious of the fact that I am yet another man standing at this podium here addressing you this morning. And let me just say that there were 2 choices: stand back or stand up for what all of you have come here for, and say to the choreographers, thank you for reminding us, yes, that there are still many of us who lead this discussion in the UN, but there is, in fact, as the Secretary General said, an equal number of us who are women who lead our struggle for what the CSW stands for and for what many of you have come here. Let me also say that as our community gathers here at the United Nations to reflect on progress towards gender equality and the empowerment of women, you and we all are asking, what have we achieved and what have we not achieved? And where do we go from here? And if we have learned something from this long road, it is that the pathway to progress towards gender equality is not linear. War, conflict, climate change-induced disasters, economic shocks, and social and political backlash are putting up a wall of resistance against gender equality. Indeed, we have to face a harsh truth. Gender inequality and the poverty experienced by so many women and girls are not inevitable outcomes of the crisis we face, but rather a consequence of systemic failures. While global wealth today stands at nearly $500 trillion in cash, how is it possible that over 300 million women and girls are still living in extreme poverty, living on less than $1.90 a day? This is just one issue that cannot be solved by ad hoc investments or piecemeal policies. UNDP, as part of the UN development system, is committed to examining the structures that perpetuate inequalities, the economy, the international financial system, institutions, laws, policies, and norms that drive our current reality. Many think of these structures as gender neutral. You know better, we know better. Yet many of these macroeconomic decisions and fiscal policies take a particularly high toll on women living in poverty. Consider the debt crisis. On average, low-income countries today are more likely to allocate more than twice as much funding to debt servicing as they do to social assistance, which is vital to prevent people from falling into poverty. As precious resources are diverted, fiscal space shrinks, and social services are cut, women's unpaid labor should not be the safety net that keeps households and countries afloat, but often is. The world should commit to restructuring the debt of developing countries urgently as part of wider reform of the international financial architecture, which is so crucial to allow millions of women and men to escape poverty. A message that the United Nations underscored at the recent meeting of the G20 finance ministers and central bank governors hosted by Brazil, and at which Brazil put the issue of hunger, poverty and inequality at the top of the agenda of finance ministers, which is where it belongs. Indeed, we are seeing how many developing countries are in fact not waiting for change. That includes public institutions that are reimagining development whereby gender equality is in fact a core value at every stage of the public financing cycle, everything from budgeting to the way resources are generated through taxation. This is driving real change in many of your countries. That includes lifting heavy taxation burdens from women who can least afford to pay them and consistently making the economy work for everyone. However, no progress will be made or sustained without strong institutions that are accountable to all rights holders under their care, especially women living in poverty. Working in close partnership with virtually all of you in the room today, UNDP and many of our sister agencies have seen the difference that strong, accountable institutions are making to the lives of women. Choices matter, policies have consequences, and we all need to redouble our efforts in addressing those. In UNDP, we have also learned a great deal through the UNDP Gender Equality Seal for public institutions, which is working alongside almost 100 public institutions across the world to systematically integrate gender equality considerations and standards in their work and their ethic. The UN family and our partners also continue to support countries to align public and private finance with gender equality and the SDGs through integrated national financing frameworks in over 80 countries. This, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, is going to the core of where systemic change is occurring, can occur, and often is not yet occurring fast enough. We are deeply committed in addressing these systemic changes, and last month over 180 senior policymakers from 40 countries participated in the first ever UNDP Global Dialogue on Public Finance, Tax and Gender Equality in Istanbul, another step in the direction of addressing the systemic and structural changes we need to bring about. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, we have a long way to go, but many of you who sit here in this room also represent that there is a long way we have come from. And together I hope we will continue to make this journey not only faster, but also much more central to the work of our United Nations. Thank you so much.
I thank the Administrator of the United Nations Development Program for his statement. I now invite the civil society representative, Ms. Chetna Gala-Sinha, a social entrepreneur and founder of the Mandesh Foundation, to make a statement.
Namaste. Respected dignitaries on dais and respected audience. Today I am here to share with you the lessons I have learned from rural women in India. These are incredible women. They never had an opportunity to go to school. They had no degrees, no travel. They have guided me on the journey of my life. These are ordinary women who did extraordinary things in their life with their greatest courage, dignity, and humility. 3 decades ago, I left Mumbai and went to stay in a village in a drought-stricken area in Maharashtra, India. Many women would come to me and try to solve their solutions and come to me. One of them was Kantabai. Kantabai was doing her business of big blacksmith on the street. And Kantabai said, I want to save. And my obvious question to Kantabai was that you are doing business on the street. Do you even have a money to save? She was insistent. She said, I want to plan my life. I want to manage finance, and I want to save. So I told Kantabai that if you want to save, why don't we go to the bank? With Kantabai, many other women who were street vendors, fruit vendors, wage laborers came to bank to open the saving account. The bank officer said that Kantabai do not have a money. She wants to save less than half cent a day. So they said she's not an affordable client to us. And they denied to accept Kantabai as a customer of the bank. So we thought, if banks are not opening the account, why not start the bank for women like Kantabai? And we applied for the banking license. But you know what? It was not easy. The Central Bank of India denied the license, saying that your promoting members are non-literate, so we cannot issue the license. I went to women, I wept, I cried. I said, we couldn't get the license because our women cannot read and write. You know what our women said? They said, we will learn to read and write again. We will learn to read and write. We have not been to the school. We'll learn and apply again to the Central Bank of India. After 5 months, we went back again. And when we went to the Central Bank of India, you know what our women said to the officer? They said, we cannot read and write, but we can count. And they said, you denied the license, but they challenged the officer and they said, ask us to calculate the interest of any principal amount. If we fail, don't issue the license. But tell your officers to do it without calculator and see who can calculate faster. Needless to say that we got the banking license. And I'm so proud to share with you that our women didn't stop there. They said, we want to manage the finance, we want to learn the skills, we want to start the business. So we started the business school for rural women, the first business school which our foundation started for rural women in India. You wouldn't believe it, that rural women like Kerabai, who had never been to the school, came to our radio. We started the radio, which was operated by all women. Kerabai came to the radio and she said, I want to feature my own program. Our radio manager said that, Kerabai, you cannot read and write. She said, I cannot read and write, but I can sing. And she featured her own program. Even the younger women were having an aspiration. The young girl, Reshma, came to the bank. And she said that in summer vacation, I want to work. We were surprised, why you want to work? You know, Reshma was rearing buffaloes. She said, I want to go to high school. I will work for 2 months and I will buy a bicycle to go to school. And Reshma went to high school getting the bicycle. And thousands of girls have got the bicycle. But Reshma didn't stop there. She became an athlete. She came to US in state of Virginia, ran the marathon and won the gold medal. The Buffalo Errors, Reshma, she became a marathon runner and now she is traveling globally. I just want to tell you that when I stand here, I want to share that these women, on the strength of their capital, we started a bank with no outside support. We started a business school for rural women from foundation. And with the experience of our women in banking, we started the first pension product for women. These women never went to the school, but they designed the pension product, and we were the first bank to do it. Microcredit industry is huge. In India itself, we have $60 billion industry. Women take the loan and repaid the loan. And they proved that we are bankable. They do micro savings, microcredit, and micro pension. They want to build their collaterals, assets, and wealth. And I also want to say that our women are also doing digital banking. They are champions of digital banking. They own digital wallets. And when they own digital wallets, they say that we do not want to just have access on finance, but control on finance. With the bank, with the radio station, with the business school, one thing I've learned from our women, and that is never provide poor solutions to poor people. They are smart. Today, our women are building not only the micro enterprise, but they are building their assets. They are giving jobs to other women also. So today I say that when women prosper, they don't prosper alone. They invest in their children, they invest in their community. When they step out of their homes, they break century-old caste barrier and conditioning. And when I ask these women, from where do you get this strength? How can you make it? Everything. You know what they say? Our courage is the capital. And I say, their courage is my capital. And today, when all of you are listening to me today, I would like to say that you can also get your courage from so many women around you as a capital. And I would like to say here, when you invest in women, economy grows and society thrives. Namaste.
I thank the civil society representative for his statement. And now I invite the Commission to hear a statement by a youth representative, Ms. Stacy Maddala of Malawi, a data scientist.
Allow me to stand on the existing protocols already acknowledged. President of the General Assembly, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Stacy Ndala. I am from Malawi. This morning, I'll be speaking to you on the notion that the youth count, the future is now. I've worked with young women and men from diverse backgrounds. And one thing I have realized is that we share in our challenges. To this day, we're still finding our way through long-standing inequalities that have been birthed from discrimination, a lack of voice, financing, and support. To this day, so many young people fail to access education. And this is because of poverty, early marriages, sex preferences, among the many social factors. Our programs and interventions are not being funded because of a lack of recognition for their importance. Young women and girls are disproportionately affected by these challenges. Distinguished guests, this year, our CSW implores us on the quest to accelerate the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. I urge each and every one of us to make a deliberate effort in supporting us young people, considering our diversities, protecting us against all forms of discrimination and harassment, because we want to be heard. In the last decade, you can agree with me that we have seen so many rising young stars talk of Malawian Tanda Mandui, a digital survey entrepreneur, gender activist. Talk of Zimbabwean Varai Dzokativu, a gender and education activist. Speak of Nigerian Temilade Salami, a climate justice activist. This only goes to show that we're willing to put in the work for the change that we want to see. And we would like you to partner with us. We want you to support us in our interventions. We do not want to be mere beneficiaries of all the policies and all the programs that you're bringing, but we want to work with you. As the world is being digitized by the day, we have so many emerging technologies. I urge you to invest in women and girls. Women and girls in engineering, in science, in math. We, ladies and gentlemen, we want equity in allocation of these resources, and we want equality in all these opportunities. Let us empower young women and girls. Let us be their allies and not opponents. Let us support them and not crusade them. As former President Barack Obama said, empowering a woman isn't just the right thing to do. It is actually the smart thing to do. This morning, I'd like you to reflect on how you have been supporting the youth, especially the women and girls, whether individually or in your work units. The reality on the ground is that we're barely being included in major decision-making processes. We're not in policy-making spaces and are rarely at the tables where important decisions to do with the economy, politics, or even the social, including the health system-related issues that affect us, are made. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, let us join hands in advocating for inclusive legislations, policies, and programs to address these long-standing existing inequalities. We as young people are demanding that we're included in all areas of development at all levels because we are the future, and the future is now. With these few remarks, allow me to take my leave. Thank you. Gracias. Asante sana. Zikomo kwambili.
I thank the youth representative for her statement. At this juncture, I would like to briefly pause our meeting for the podium to be rearranged while the Secretary General takes his leave for his other commitments. On behalf of the Commission, I would like to thank the Secretary General for being with us this morning. At this juncture, I am pleased to invite the Executive Director of the United Nations Entity for Gender Equality and the Empowerment of Women, or UN Women for short, Ms. Sima Sami Baus, to take her seat on the podium. I now invite the Commission to begin its consideration of Agenda Item 3, the follow-up to the 4th World Conference on Women and to the 23rd Special Session of the General Assembly, entitled Women 2000, Gender Equality, Development and Peace for the 21st Century. The documentation under this item is listed in today's journal. And I now invite the Executive Director of UN Women, Ms. Sima Baus, to make a statement and introduce the reports of the Secretary General under Agenda Item 3.
Good morning, everyone. It's great to be here, and I feel the energy in the room is getting better as we see more women come up the stage. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, members of civil society, young people, colleagues, friends, and fellow feminists. We meet at a time of great uncertainty. Peace feels painfully distant, war painfully prevalent, suffering painfully ubiquitous. Backlash on gender equality is on the rise, with a ferocity and anger that is unfamiliar to many of us. From the wars around the world, the violence online, the war we wage on our planet, women and girls continue to be the ones suffering the consequences of decisions not of their making. In the Middle East, Sudan, Myanmar, Haiti, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Ukraine, Afghanistan, and elsewhere, women and girls bear the brunt of conflicts and of wars they did not start. In all conflicts, we unequivocally condemn all acts of gender-based violence and all forms of violence against any woman or girl anywhere in the world. Excellencies, we need an urgent ceasefire in Gaza. We are witnessing a destruction and killing of civilians, US personnel, humanitarians, and journalists at an unprecedented scale. More than 9,000 women have been killed, and this number continues to rise at an unthinkable rate. Nothing can justify this. In Israel, as we heard from the Secretary General, the Special Representative for Sexual Violence in Conflict, Ms. Pramila Patton's report has horrific accounts of sexual violence against women and girls in the October 7 attacks. There are also harrowing testimonies of sexual violence by Israeli forces against Palestinian women in detention, house raids, and checkpoints. All such acts and all forms of violence against women and girls are condemned. Excellencies, we call on the immediate and safe delivery of humanitarian aid across Gaza, the release of all hostages, an end to occupation, and for a return to a path of peace, a peace that is just and comprehensive, and that is inclusive of the crucial voices and leadership of women. This is our only hope for the future we want. Excellencies, the struggle for gender equality is not new. Women have been fighting for their rights for centuries. History is replete with heroes, women, as well as enlightened men who laid out a path for us to follow, who exemplified sacrifice for our cause, and who modeled the courage and wisdom we need today more than ever. We stand on their shoulders, and we owe it to them to keep the fight going until true equality in social, economic, and political life is attained. We aspire to leave a mark on history as they have done. This Commission on the Status of Women is an expression of our understanding of the centrality of gender equality to the aspirations that we have as a family of nations. None can be achieved without equality between women and men. And this year's priority theme focuses on accelerating progress on gender equality by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing. We can transform economies if our professed commitments to equality are matched by our budgets as they should be. This we must do with urgency. And the evidence is as stark as ever. more than 100 million women and girls could be lifted out of poverty if government prioritized education, healthcare, fair and equal wages, and expanded social benefits. Closing gender gaps in employment could boost gross domestic product per capita by 20% across all regions. The return on investment in gender equality is a guaranteed win for any society and economy. Distinguished delegates, time is not on our side. Across the world, poverty continues to have a woman's face, with women experiencing higher rates of poverty than men. That is expected to persist beyond any of our lifetimes. More than 10% of women globally live on less than $2.15 per day. If we want to say it right, they don't really live. They barely survive. Today, 1 in 10 women live in extreme poverty, and at the current rate of progress, as many as 342 million women will still be living in poverty in or by 2030. This makes a mockery of our 2030 agenda. Both poverty and women's financial exclusion is fueled by discriminatory gender norms which are entrenched in our economic, political, and social systems. Women spend nearly 3 hours more per day than men performing unpaid care and domestic work. This work forms the backbone of our homes, our communities, and our societies. It keeps economies running, enables growth, drives progress and development. This work can be properly recognized and compensated to the mutual benefit of women and economies, if we choose to do so. Dear delegates, no matter how limited the fiscal space may be, gender equality should always be a priority, always the smartest and wisest investment to make. There is no national policy that will not benefit from gender equality. There is no national development policy that will not benefit from gender equality. There is no sustainable development goal that can be attained without gender equality. With a mere 6 years to go, gender equality remains our best hope to get back on track to 2030. Excellencies, colleagues, feminists, this CSW 68 sees record numbers of participants from civil society in attendance. To all those here representing civil society and young people, I warmly welcome you and thank you for your energy and insight. The women's movement has time and again been at the heart of every great step forward for equality. You play a critical role in holding us accountable to and upholding our collective social contract through your advocacy, your expertise, and the invaluable work many of you and your organizations do in crises. When things are at their most bleak, you step up. When help is desperately needed, you are there on the front lines, supporting, providing essential services, driving systemic change. So, dear delegates, we must do more to invest in women's rights organizations, especially feminist grassroots, youth organizations, and women's collectives. These organizations must have flexible and predictable financing that matches the scale of need with the power of your movement and voice across the world. Excellencies, the Secretary General's report on this CSW priority theme is clear. Policy choices are not beyond us. We can and must choose to end poverty for women and girls. We must commit to using the levers to finance, to invest in, and build systems and social institutions that can tackle gender inequality and that can address structural poverty. This year, we must not just play the game better, we must change it all together. We must do so with boundless energy and unswerving resolution. We do so at the CSW and when we meet later this year for the Summit of the Future, and again at the 69th session of this Commission, when we will take stock of the 30 years since Beijing Platform for Action. I urge all of us in this room to seize these opportunities as a chance to recommit and to scale up our work and our investment in gender equality. Excellencies, let me highlight 4 concrete and achievable priorities as pathways to end women and girls' poverty for your deliberations. 1, we need inclusive, equitable fiscal pacts. These must address redistribution, progressive taxation, well-targeted investments, increased official development assistance, and properly financed national women's machineries to lead on gender equality and women's empowerment. 2, we need high-quality, accessible public services, appropriately tailored to the needs of everyone. This includes quality education for girls and decent work for women. 3, we need inclusive, gender-responsive social protection systems with full and equal access and benefits for women and girls living in poverty. 4, we need to invest in the care economy as a strategy for reducing women and girls' poverty and for building more robust care and green economies. Excellencies, colleagues, friends, feminists, we can no longer dismiss a gender equality dividend that we need now more than ever. We cannot cling to excuses that it is too difficult, too expensive, too transgressive to tradition, or too far down our list of priorities. And we cannot, in good conscience, deny women and girls, in all their diversity, the equality that is their right. I reiterate my call on International Women's Day for all of us to be the light that brings hope and accelerates progress towards an equal, sustainable, and peaceful future for all people, for every woman and every girl everywhere. I know that this is within our reach, so let us all push forward together. To the delegates and colleagues observing the holy month of Ramadan, may it be peaceful and a time for reflection and lessened suffering for all women and girls everywhere. I thank you and wish us all a very successful CSW 68. Thank you.
I thank the Executive Director of UN Women for her statement, and I now invite the Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, or CEDAW, Ms. Ana Pelaez Narvaez, to introduce the report of her committee.
Señor Presidente.
Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honoured today to address the forum in my capacity as Chair of the Committee on the Elimination of Discrimination Against Women. Among the many issues that the committee has worked on in the past 12 months, I would like to focus on CEDAW's recent work on women, peace and security. The CEDAW Committee deplores the high toll of victims, mainly women and children, who have been killed, wounded, and displaced by the war in Gaza, the occupied Palestinian territory, and in Israel. In a recent statement, the committee called for an immediate and sustained ceasefire and a peaceful and lasting solution that involves the leadership and decision-making of both Israeli and Palestinian women towards building peace. More recently, the task force on Afghanistan has continued to monitor violations of the human rights of women and how this is institutionalized, and this may amount to gender persecution, which is recognized as a crime against humanity in the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, and that those responsible should be held accountable. The committee is also deeply concerned that sexual violence against women is used in IDP camps in a state party to the CEDAW Convention. In this regard, the committee has already requested an exceptional report from that state party and has submitted questions to them. President, I would like to say that this year the CEDAW Committee is honored to co-chair the platform of independent mechanisms on the elimination of discrimination and violence against women, the EDVOR platform, this year, together with Ms. Ekvi. On the 8th of March, this platform published a joint statement entitled Awareness and Action, Poverty, Inequality and Gender-Based Violence Against Women. The CEDAW Committee has continued to work on its draft of General Recommendation number 40 on the equal and inclusive representation of women in decision-making systems, which we hope will be adopted in October this year. To coincide with the Summit of the Future, this summit should be inspired by this general recommendation, and we look forward to receiving responses. We'd also like to say that thanks to the support of UN Women, we will be carrying out regional consultations on recommendation 41 on gender stereotypes. The concept note has already been adopted. Over the last year, the committee has adopted 24 concluding observations following constructive dialogues with states parties, as well as concluding observations on the review of one state party in the absence of a delegation. It also adopted lists of issues in relation to periodic reports. As regards the current backlog, there are 37 state party reports that will require additional work. I'd also like to say that the committee has adopted measures in relation to 10 individual complaints, finding violations in 4 of these cases as a result of a lack of so I have to stress, that the meeting time has been reduced from 10 days to just 7 days. Under Article 8 of the optional protocol, the committee has adopted a report of an inquiry concerning restrictive access to legal abortion. This will be made public shortly. A research visit was also carried out in December. As regards the harmonization of working methods, in May 2023, the CEDAW Committee and the Committee on the Rights of the Child for the first time held back-to-back dialogues with São Tomé and Príncipe. This pilot allowed the committees to formulate several joint recommendations in relation to issues affecting the rights of girls, such as child marriage, school dropout and early pregnancy. I would also like to mention the deep concern that all of the chairs of the treaty bodies feel as a result of the urgent cuts that have been taken because of the financial situation as a result of the insufficiencies in the quotas paid to the UN. At this time, this shortfall is really endangering human rights. And for the first time in the 70 years, if the sessions of the treaty bodies were to be suspended, the damage to human rights would be irreversible. Chair, allow me to conclude by thanking all of our partners, especially UN Women, for their support for the general recommendation and also for supporting us today here with the participation of various experts. We must continue to strengthen this partnership and these connections. I'd like to thank all of the partners who are part of the interinstitutional and interagency group on CEDAW reporting. Have Asia Pacific, the International Women's Rights Action, and women's organizations, local women's organizations, local human rights institutions, and Femi Mohan and ONCE for their support and providing other meetings. At the moment, we regret that public hybrid meetings will no longer be serviced with interpretation. On behalf of CEDAW, I would like to thank you all for your support, and I'm fully available to answer any questions. Thank you.
I thank the chair of CEDAW for her statement. And I now invite the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its Causes and Consequences, Ms. Reem Al-Salem, to make a statement.
Your Excellencies, Ambassador Antonio Manuel Rivera Lagdameo, Chair of the CSW, Mrs. Sima Bahous, UN Executive Director, distinguished representatives and participants. Thank you very much for the opportunity to address the Commission. Women's rights are human rights. However, I'm not sure I am the only one to feel that we stand at an important crossroad when it comes to this fact in law, which is also an aspiration we collectively strive to uphold. Any advances that we may have made, be they in women's political or economic participation, are threatened by the frightening setbacks we have witnessed in the last few years. And nothing exemplifies this setback more clearly than the utter disregard for the safety, dignity, and humanity of women that we have seen in recent conflicts, and the contempt that warring parties have shown towards the international human rights and humanitarian law that protects civilians, including women. The moment of reckoning has arrived. The international community has failed so far to usher in a ceasefire in Gaza for what is essentially a war on women and children, or to stop sexual violence against women in Sudan, or the terrorization of women in Haiti, or the marginalization of women from public life in Afghanistan, just to mention a few. What will it take for member states, including those that center gender equality in their foreign and domestic policy, to show that the lives of women indeed matter? Another example is the frightening scale at which information and technology-facilitated platforms and tools are being co-opted to facilitate sexual exploitation, violence, and abuse of women and children, particularly those who are marginalized, as well as our inability to keep up with their constant evolution and harmful use. These global developments give a particular urgency to reconsidering the proposals that were made by my mandate over the years to include violence against women and girls as a standing item on the agenda of the CSW and to develop a dedicated global plan. Such action would also be in line with the UN Secretary General's call for an emergency plan on violence against women. By strengthening the ties that the CSW has with international regional human rights mechanisms, like my own, which by the way turned 30 this year, it would also ensure that all issues before it, such as this year's priority themes on poverty and gender-responsive institution and financing, are anchored in human rights principles, and that implementation is measured against the obligation of states. And in fact, speaking of state obligations, has the time come to resurrect plans for an optional protocol to the CEDAW, specifically dedicated to ending violence against women? Most of my predecessor and I believe so. Unfortunately, today I'm very concerned about the impact of the financial crisis of the UN, which has severely hampered the ability of special procedures like my mandate to do its work. As for the issues before the CSW, let me say that during my visit to different countries, I have seen the devastating impact of curtailed programs and services that were initially designed for some of the most vulnerable groups in society, including women from racial and minoritized groups, as part of austerity measures. Similarly, funding to frontline, grassroots, and women's rights organizations that offer specialized support and outreach to those most in need is being frequently sacrificed, which is both short-sighted and detrimental for the groups concerned. We must commit to procuring funds for women, including for those who are most at risk of falling through the cracks of social protection systems and other measures, if we want to truly empower them and lift them out of poverty. Equally, we must ensure that women's rights organizations participate in decision-making on public funds and tax policies. Finally, governments must improve gender outcomes of taxation through removing overt biases and removing tax systems that currently result in implicit gender biases. They must design and implement tax policies that promote gender equality. Where they have not done so, states must conduct gender-sensitive analysis to assess and correct for pre-existing biases. I look forward to discussing these priorities with all of you and recommit my mandate in support of your efforts. Thank you very much.
I thank the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women, its causes and consequences, for her statement. I now invite the Chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls, Ms. Dorothy Estrada Tank, to make a statement.
Thank you very much. Muchísimas gracias. Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates and participants, it is an honor for me to address the Commission on the Status of Women as chairperson of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls for the first time at its opening session. Our expert group sincerely appreciates this opportunity to present at the opening segment, alongside the chair of the CEDAW Committee and the Special Rapporteur on Violence Against Women and Girls. Mr. Chair, globally, women and girls are disproportionately represented among those living in poverty. As we have heard before, if current trends continue, 340 million women and girls will live in extreme poverty by 2030. But not only that, extreme inequality has also deepened. And since 2020, the richest 1% of the world has seized nearly 2/3 of all new wealth, almost twice as much money as the bottom 99% of the world's population. Women and girls experience poverty and inequality due to blatant systemic failures and structural discrimination within political, social, cultural, and economic norms, systems, and institutions. Poverty and inequality are thus not inevitable. Historical and continuing economic policy choices have caused them. These policy priorities are not gender neutral, as they have been developed within patriarchal systems that privilege male and corporate power and ignore women's and girls' specific experiences and rights, perpetuating inequality and discrimination. As one woman told us during consultations for a report of last year, we are not poor, we are being impoverished. Poverty is a gendered phenomenon, deeply imbricated with other intersecting forms of inequality. Women's and girls' experiences of poverty intersect with their race, ethnicity, migratory status, age, disability, religion, geographical location, sexual orientation, and gender identity to produce distinct forms of inequality, discrimination, and violence that vary over time and place. Allow me to bring your attention to the case of Afghanistan, where the oppressive regime of gender apartheid under which Afghan women and girls live has aggravated existing conditions of acute poverty. Women and girls in Afghanistan and in some other countries are being erased from public life. Their rights to education, work, health, access to justice, and freedom of movement, attire, and behavior have been severely restricted. When girls are deprived of education, their life opportunities for the future are enormously reduced. And for those already living in poverty, this vicious cycle will probably not be broken. Today, we have the opportunity to reevaluate dominant concepts of unlimited economic growth, often based on deeply embedded gender discrimination, transnational economic inequality, environmental destruction, failure to fulfill international solidarity, as well as non-existent or insufficient social protection and public services, to move to guarantee human rights and accelerate the achievement of gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment. For too long, mainstream approaches to gender and poverty have focused on how to integrate women and girls more effectively into existing unequal economic systems, rather than on challenging and transforming those systems so that they promote and protect human rights. As a way forward, our working group has called for a feminist human rights-based economy that enables and constructs substantive equality, solidarity, and socioeconomic and environmental justice. To achieve this, dear participants, we have recommended that states, international economic institutions, and corporations, 1, take measures for the just redistribution of wealth and resources and shift away from excessive consumption, for a fair global trade order, tax and debt justice, corporate accountability, and the realization of the right to development with gender equality at the core. 2, to ensure the inclusive and meaningful participation of diverse groups of women and girls in designing socioeconomic measures. 3, transform the social organization of care through its recognition, revaluation, and redistribution, and comprehensive gender-responsive frameworks, policies, and services. 4, noting the sole progress on Sustainable Development Goals 1, 5, and 10, reiterate the centrality of women's and girls' human rights and gender equality to poverty eradication strategies and to reducing inequalities within and between nations. Mr. Chair, this is our time to accelerate the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by reconsidering the dominant economic paradigm and substituting it for a model that places human rights, social justice, and the dignity of women and girls, the half of humanity, at the center. I thank you.
I thank the chair of the Working Group on Discrimination Against Women and Girls for her statement. I now invite the Commission to begin the general discussion under Agenda Item 3, follow-up to the 4th World Conference on Women and to the 23rd Special Session of the General Assembly, entitled Women 2000, Gender Equality, Development, and Peace for the 21st Century. Before giving the floor to the first speaker on the list, I would like to remind speakers to kindly respect the agreed time limits of 10 minutes for delegations speaking on behalf of groups and 5 minutes for member states speaking in their national capacity. As previously announced, the microphone or video will be automatically muted when the allotted time has elapsed. I also wish to recommend that delegations follow the live list of speakers on the e-speakers module of the e-delegate portal so that they are ready to speak when given the floor. I thank you for your understanding and cooperation. I also kindly request that statements be delivered at a normal speed to allow the interpreters to render a faithful interpretation of the interventions. Longer versions of statements may be sent for circulation to e-statements@un.org. And then I now give the floor to this distinguished representative of Uganda on behalf of the African group, Her Excellency Amongi Betty Ongo, Minister of Gender, Labor, and Social Development.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. On behalf of the African Group, allow me to congratulate you and your Bureau for the wonderful way in which you are leading this session. We are confident that this deliberation will result in a successful conclusion under your able leadership. The African Group believes that the adoption of the 2030 Agenda was a clear indication that the future of humanity and of our planet lies in our hands. The world would be a better place in 2030 if we act collectively and genuinely map the road to truly inclusive, sustainable development on the fight against poverty and hunger. It will be for us all to ensure that the journey is successful and its gains are irreversible. The African Group is concerned that 6 years before the expiry of 2030 Agenda, it is estimated that millions of people may still live in extreme poverty by 2030, of which more than 10% will be women, and most of them live in sub-Saharan Africa. The group underscores that the true test of commitment to Agenda 2030 is the outcome of its implementation. It is our duty to build a better future for all people, including women and girls, that have been denied the chance to lead decent, dignified lives, to tap their full human potential. The group reaffirms its commitment to the full implementation of 2030 Agenda and African Union 2063 Agenda. We recognize that it will not be possible to achieve these goals and targets without a revitalized and enhanced global partnership supported by concrete policies and actions outlined in the Addis Ababa Action Agenda. To strengthen these policies, there is need to broaden the strengthened partnership, including South-to-South, North-South, and triangular partnership, to ensure supportive international frameworks for trade, taxation, technology, and international finance in order to sustain long-term human development approach for sufficient, predictable, and well-coordinated financing for development, including ODAs, debt cancellation, and new financing sources, instruments, arrangements, and institutions. In this regard, efforts should be made to reinforce international cooperation, promoting and establishing a fair global trading system, reforming the international financial architecture, facilitating for developing countries access to markets, to technologies, including health technologies, as well as fulfilling the inalienable right to development. The importance of strengthening international cooperation on asset return and recovery, eliminate safe havens that create incentive for the transfer abroad of stolen assets and illicit financial flows can never be overemphasized when it comes to eradicating poverty and mitigating its impacts, including on women. The Addis Ababa Action Plan agenda is key to achieving a balanced financing approach, while governments and institutional implementation capabilities at the country level are also both development outcomes and desirable ends in themselves. Chairperson, Sustainable Development Goal 1 and 5, ending poverty in all its forms and dimensions by 2030, and achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls respectively, emphasize the intricable link between eradicating poverty and the empowerment of women. They are a recognition that by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective will contribute to accelerating the achievement of gender equality and empowerment of women and girls. We are convinced that it is possible to make policy choices aimed at accelerating progress towards ending poverty and achieving inclusive, sustainable development for all. Accomplishing these goals require investment in a comprehensive set of economic and social policies aimed at driving women's full economic participation. The African Group places great emphasis on the cause of the eradication of poverty as an overarching goal of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goal. National, regional, and international efforts should be harnessed to achieve this goal. It is regrettable that the current global context with its multiple challenges threaten the successful implementation of commitments contained in 2030 Agenda and the achievement of its goals and targets. Those challenges have arisen due to pandemics, ongoing global financial, economic, the world force crisis and continuing food insecurity, the energy crisis, and the challenges posed by environmental degradation, including desertification. Those challenges have a disproportionate impact and underscores the multidimensional nature of poverty and the critical importance of social protection for reducing vulnerabilities of women and girls' experiences. We are pleased by the UN General Assembly Secretary call for Sustainable Development Goal stimulus to rapidly scale up financing to accelerate progress towards these goals. The stimulus requires action in 3 areas: tackling the high cost of debt and risk of debt distress, massively increasing affordable and long-term financing issued by multinational development banks, and expanding contingency financing. By mobilizing resources equitably and targeting investment and policies towards ending women's and girls' poverty. Chairperson, progress in achieving SDG 5 on gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls is slow and may not be fulfilled by its target date. Women continue to face discrimination, carry the burden of poverty, and remain vulnerable in many areas. Women still outnumber men among the world's poorest people. Many women work in vulnerable, low-paid jobs and in predominantly informal sector. We welcome emphasis on strengthening efforts for women and girls to realize the right to their enjoyment of the highest attainable standards of physical, mental, and their right to education, employment, and decent work. This year's theme on accelerating achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a greater gender perspective carries, therefore, a particular significance. It highlights the importance of addressing the root cause of poverty as they disproportionately affect women and girls. These include, but are not limited to, addressing feminization of poverty, ensuring economic empowerment of women and girls through interior, ensuring equal access to affordable quality education, healthcare, local and global markets, productive resources, including land ownership and microfinancing, decent work, and adequate standard of living. The African Group is cognizant of the fact that poverty is a complex problem involving a set of economic as well as social development issues that cannot be solved through economic growth only, but through a human-centered approach as recognized by the principles and the goals of the Copenhagen Declaration. We also recognize that historical injustices rooted in colonialism and transatlantic slave trades have undeniably contributed to the poverty, underdevelopment, marginalization, social exclusion, economic disparities, instability and insecurity that affect many people, including women and girls in different parts of the world, in particular in developing countries. The need to develop international programs for economic and social development of these countries are underscored in the Durban Declaration and Program for Action, which still remains vital. Chairperson, African groups realizes that sustainable development cannot be realized without peace and security, and peace and security will be at risk without sustainable development. The group underscores the need to build peaceful, just, and inclusive society, that women in conflict, post-conflict zones, and in countries facing sanctions should be accorded assistance needed to strengthen their productive capacity in all sectors that will enable them to move to sustainable patterns of consumption and production with equal footing with women from other peaceful countries. The group realizes that violence against women and girls is a universal phenomenon. Injustice and inequality persist in both developing and developed countries, impacting women's
I thank the representative of Uganda, and I now call on the distinguished representative of Belgium on behalf of the European Union, Her Excellency Marie-Colline Leroy, State Secretary for Gender Equality, Equal Opportunities and Diversity.
Honorable President.
Honorable President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to speak on behalf of the European Union and its member states, including the Republic of the candidate countries of North Macedonia, Montenegro, Serbia, Albania, Ukraine, the Republic of Moldova, Bosnia and Herzegovina, and Georgia, and Andorra and Monaco align themselves with this statement. The EU welcomes the 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women as an opportunity to achieve tangible progress. We cannot accept that 383 million women and girls around the world are experiencing extreme poverty. Many more are deprived, vulnerable, or at risk of poverty in all its dimensions. This session takes place in troubling times. Crises, conflicts, and war are exacerbating inequalities and poverty. Conflicts risk putting pressure on the financing available for poverty alleviation. The impacts of climate change are increasing poverty globally, disproportionately affecting women and girls. The pursuit of peace and security, a human rights-based approach, and gender-responsive measures to tackle poverty must be at the center of our multilateral common agenda. We cannot achieve these objectives without the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and girls at all levels. The Summit of the Future and the Pact for the Future will be a critical opportunity to make these commitments a reality. Women and girls are disproportionately impacted across societies all over the world by multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination, sexual and gender-based violence, and other human rights violations and abuses. This situation hampers the potential to eradicate the feminization of poverty and lift women and girls out of intergenerational cycles of poverty. In this context, we must accelerate progress 26 times faster to reach SDG 1 by 2030, which is especially off track when it comes to women and girls. At this session, the Commission on the Status of Women must build political will and spur commitments to effectively tackle poverty experienced by women and girls globally, including in fragile, crisis, and conflict-affected areas. This includes tackling root causes such as gender-based violence and discrimination, inequality, gender stereotypes, and discriminatory social norms. Women and girls' empowerment and leadership are vitally important today. The European Union works towards the full, equal, and meaningful participation of women and youth in all their diversity, in all spheres of public and political life. Women have a crucial role to play in sustainable development in the broader sense, as civil society actors, human rights defenders, mediators, and peace builders. Economic empowerment and economic independence for women and girls is a key factor in successfully eradicating all forms of poverty, as is quality and inclusive education. Examples of other critical measures include financial inclusion, closing the gender digital divide, decent work and equal pay, social protection, welfare, health services, and gender transformative climate action. Women devote, on average, 3.2 times more time than men to unpaid care work, hampering their opportunities to earn equal levels of income, advance their careers, and perpetuating cycles of poverty over their life course. It is thus vital to support the equal sharing of care responsibilities between women and men and girls and boys and within the household. Increasing access to affordable and quality social services, including care services, child care, maternity, paternity, and paid parental leave, improving working conditions and equal pay in the care sector, are important policy drivers in this regard. The European Union remains committed to these goals, not least through the European Care Strategy. We cannot stress enough the interlinkages between fragility, crisis, conflicts, poverty, health, and sexual and gender-based violence globally. The European Union's financial commitment to preventing and responding to sexual and gender-based violence has averaged 91 million euros per year in recent years, going up to 282 million in 2022. In addition, more than 40 million euros were spent annually in 2022 to 2023 to tackle sexual and gender-based violence in humanitarian responses. The European Union remains committed to the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of all human rights and to the full and effective implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the Program of Action on the International Conference on Population and Development and the outcomes of their review conferences, and remains committed to sexual and reproductive health and rights in this context. Having that in mind, the European Union reaffirms its commitment to the promotion, protection, and fulfillment of the right of every individual to have full control over and decide freely and responsibly on matters related to their sexuality and sexual and reproductive health, free from discrimination, coercion, and violence. The European Union further stresses the need for universal access to quality and affordable, comprehensive sexual and reproductive health education, including comprehensive sexuality education and healthcare services. In order to respond to these pressing challenges, the EU calls for gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting to accelerate progress on gender equality and facilitate the implementation of gender-responsive policies and legislation. To succeed, we need men and boys as allies and as agents and beneficiaries of change. Gender equality should not be a polarizing factor. Gender equality must unite us. While implementation relies on action at national and regional level, international cooperation and concerted efforts among all stakeholders are essential. This requires that we give voice and wider space to civil society, support feminist and women's rights organizations and women human rights defenders, and we must mobilize financial resources to support them. The European Union, through its external investment plan, promotes women's entrepreneurship and labor market participation, not least through Team Europe initiatives in Africa and the EU neighborhood region. The EU Global Gateway investment package prioritizes the full inclusion of women and girls in social and economic life with a focus on education and skills. Moreover, global actors, including development financing institutions, play a key role in advancing innovative finance for gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment. The European Investment Bank mainstreams gender equality and women's economic empowerment in green financing globally. Malala Yousafzai once said, "We cannot all succeed when half of us are held back." This reminds us that every government in this room must walk the talk to ensure every woman and girl can fully enjoy her human rights, live in dignity, freedom, and peace, and reach the fullest potential. As we approach the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action and the ICPD Program of Action, it is high time to step up our efforts. The EU stands ready to do its part for a successful and ambitious outcome, truly ambitious outcome of this important session. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Belgium, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Sweden on behalf of the LGBTI core group, Her Excellency Paulina Brandberg, Minister for Gender Equality and Working Life.
Chair, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the member states of the LGBTI core group. The group is co-chaired by Argentina and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. The UN LGBTI core group's overarching goal is to work within the United Nations framework to ensure a universal respect for the human rights and fundamental freedoms for all individuals without restrictions, regardless of their real or perceived sexual orientation, gender identity, or sex characteristics, including lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, and intersex persons. Our particular focus is on protecting LGBTI persons from violence and discrimination. The members of the LGBTI core group stand firmly against any form of violence, discrimination, stigmatization, and marginalization on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics. We recognize that to fully realize the mandate of the Commission on the Status of Women, the challenges faced by all LGBTI persons, including LGBTI women, adolescents, and girls, must be addressed. The priority theme for the 68th session, accelerating the achievement of gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls by addressing poverty and strengthening institutions and financing with a gender perspective, provides an opportunity for the international community to address the challenges faced by LGBTI women and girls, who often experience multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination and marginalization. LGBTI persons endure disproportionately high rates of sexual and gender-based violence, including harassment, stigma, inequality, and harmful social and cultural norms. They may contend with the lack of legal gender recognition or even face criminalization due to their sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. The deeply rooted inequalities, stigmatization, and discrimination against LGBTI women propels them into spirals of social exclusion, increasing their likelihood of living in poverty and of experiencing economic insecurity, including unemployment, underemployment, lower paid positions, and positions with limited or no benefits. By addressing poverty through a gender perspective, this session provides a critical platform to address the structural barriers that perpetuate discrimination and exclusion, and to spotlight and redress the deeply rooted inequalities and economic disparities faced by LGBTI women. Moreover, the focus on strengthening institutions and financing with a gender transformative approach aligns with the imperative to dismantle systemic barriers and ensure inclusive policies that respect, protect, and fulfill the human rights of all women and girls, including LGBTI women and girls, fostering a more equitable and empowered future for all, thus fulfilling the very notion of the 2030 Agenda of leaving no one behind. The core group recognizes the resilience of LGBTI women, human rights defenders, and women's civil society organizations, and their role as key actors that contribute to implementing the 2030 Agenda and achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, promoting laws and policies that guarantee gender equality and empowerment of women and girls in all their diversity, and responding to the needs of those most impacted by structural inequality and gender injustice. Therefore, it is important that inclusive and locally led feminist movements and women's rights organizations are supported to perform their essential roles. We call on all member states and all relevant stakeholders to work together to guarantee labor standards that provide for decent work and gender equality for all workers, including LGBTI women, equal pay for work of equal value, safe and healthy working conditions, freedom of association and the right to organize and bargain collectively, and freedom from violence, discrimination, and harassment in the world of work, including sexual and gender-based violence and harassment. We encourage member states to promote that social protective systems, public services, and sustainable infrastructure are fully inclusive of LGBTI persons and responsive to the specific challenges LGBTI women face in the context of ongoing social exclusion while addressing the structural and systemic impediments to poverty alleviation and equitable financing. Together, we must ensure this Commission addresses the intersectional challenges of women and girls in all their diversity. The LGBTI core group reiterates that the full and effective implementation of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action requires that all forms of violence, discrimination, and political, social, and economic exclusion of any individual, including LGBTI women and girls, must end. Standing up against violations and abuses of all human rights, including discrimination and exclusion of any person, is not and should never be a matter of controversy. We appeal to all delegations gathered here at the 68th session of the Commission of the Status of Women to join us in our continued advocacy for the universality of human rights and the pledge to leave no one behind. Thank you.
I thank the representative of Sweden, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of the Belarus on behalf of the group of Friends of the Family, His Excellency Valentin Rybakov, Permanent Representative of Belarus.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of 28 member states of the group of Friends of the Family, including Bangladesh, Cameroon, Comoros, Egypt, the Gambia, Indonesia, Iraq, Kuwait, Kyrgyzstan, Libya, Malaysia, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Oman, Pakistan, Qatar, the Russian Federation, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sri Lanka, Sudan, Syria, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Uganda, Yemen, Zimbabwe, and my own country, Belarus. Let me begin by reaffirming our shared commitment to advancing the goals and objectives of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which will contribute to the implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Given the priority theme, of the session of the Commission on the Status of Women, we welcome this opportunity to demonstrate our adherence to reducing poverty and enhancing development efforts, and to recall the important role that women play in the family and in society. Eradicating poverty in all its forms and dimensions, including extreme poverty, remains the greatest global challenge and is an indispensable requirement for women's economic empowerment and sustainable development. Today, when no country has yet achieved full gender equality and the feminization of poverty persists, the group recognizes the mutually reinforcing links between achieving gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls and poverty eradication. Moreover, we believe that the majority of the internationally agreed development goals, especially those related to poverty eradication, would be difficult to attain unless strategies to achieve them focus on the family. We therefore see the need to strengthen adequate support for women and provide their families with sufficient protection so that they become a powerful force for social cohesion and the means of contributing to the prosperity of society. It is important to intensify efforts to reduce poverty by granting assistance to families in difficult life situations and to pay special attention to increasing the earning power of all adult members of economically deprived families when formulating socio-economic development policies. The group shares concerns that in many societies, female-headed households, including divorced, separated, and unmarried women and widows, are at a particular risk of poverty. We therefore believe that special social protection measures are required to address feminization of poverty, in particular among older women. Mr. Chair, the member states of the group of Friends of the Family remain firmly convinced that gender equality can never be achieved unless the vital role of women in the family is fully recognized and valued by society. We are concerned that women's social and economic contributions to the welfare of the family and the social significance of maternity continue to be inadequately addressed. The lack of a family-friendly working environment, including a lack of appropriate and affordable child care services and inflexible working hours, prevent women from achieving their full potential. In this regard, the group advocates the need for appropriate policies and strategies to reconcile family and professional life to enable women to realize all the role models that they desire as mothers, as professionals, as managers, and as entrepreneurs. While recalling the social significance of maternity, motherhood, and the role of parents in the upbringing of children, particular recognition should also be given to the important role that women often play in caring for other members of their family. We believe that special efforts should be made to promote men's active involvement in responsible parenthood, since equal sharing of family responsibilities by men and women and harmonious partnership between them remain critical to their well-being and the well-being of their families. The group also advocates that motherhood and childhood are entitled to special care and support, and that maternity must not be a basis for discrimination or in any way restrict women's full participation in society. Mr. Chair, in light of the 30th anniversary of the International Year of the Family, allow me to take this opportunity to reaffirm our determination to make every possible effort to realize the goals and objectives of the International Year and its follow-up processes, in particular through the development of strategies and programs aimed at strengthening national capacities to address national priorities related to family issues. We attach great importance to the efforts of the United Nations in raising awareness, increasing understanding, and promoting policies that improve the status and well-being of the family, and express the hope that the organization will continue to play an active role in strengthening international cooperation on family issues, as well as promoting equality between women and men. Finally, on behalf of the member states of the group, let me extend our invitation to other delegations to join the group of friends of the family to promote concerted action in strengthening family-oriented policies and programs as part of an integrated, comprehensive approach to development. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Belarus, and I now give the floor to the distinguished
Mr. Chairperson, Excellencies, Ministers. It is an honor to deliver the speech in Portuguese on behalf of the community of Portuguese-speaking countries, an organization made up of 9 states on 4 continents: Angola, Brazil, Cape Verde, Guinea-Bissau, Equatorial Guinea, Mozambique, Portugal, São Tomé and Príncipe, and East Timor. With a population of over 260 million people, we joined forces politically and diplomatically for the promotion and dissemination of the Portuguese language and for cooperating in all spheres, especially as refers to gender equality, the fight against poverty and hunger, the strengthening of national institutions, and the sustainable financing of promoting gender equality, a priority theme of this year's session of the Commission, are all common and urgent challenges for all of our countries. We believe poverty represents one of the main obstacles for the development of nations, and it helps to perpetuate inequality between women and men and discrimination based on gender. We share the Secretary General's concern and the concerns of President Lula and the chairperson of this commission that 10% of women live in extreme poverty worldwide. We endorse his recommendations on the need for more vigorous collective actions focusing on eliminating poverty and hunger among women and girls, strengthening institutions, and creating favorable external environment to financing actions in matters of gender equality. Excellencies, to invest in gender equality has proven to be an indispensable tool in promoting development, economic recovery, technological advances, and even in conflict prevention. This agenda is not of exclusive interest of a select group of countries. Neither is it an agenda to be imposed by few. Rather, it's something that benefits everyone in all parts of the globe. The history of the United States shows us that women from the global south have been at the forefront of demanding equality since the creation of the United Nations. The notable example of Brazilian Bertha Lutz comes to mind. She was one of only 6 women plenipotentiary delegates sent to the San Francisco Conference in 1945, where she firmly defended the inclusion of equality between men and women in the preamble and Article 8 of the United Nations Charter. Ladies and gentlemen, ministers, heads of delegation, gender equality is a statutory principle of the Portuguese-speaking community. We are firmly committed to the full implementation of our strategic plan for gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls in our organization. We have made efforts to mainstream the gender perspective in our policies and cooperation projects. We recognize that men and boys are also beneficiaries of gender equality, as well as allies and strategic partners. And they must be involved and take on their role in such efforts. We agree on the importance of de-aggregating data according to gender and using indicators to assess the impact of gender on different public policies. It is our common goal to prevent and combat all forms of violence and discrimination against women and girls, as well as to protect victims. We have shared experiences to improve our legal frameworks for the promoting and protecting of fundamental rights and human rights of women and girls. We also seek to collaborate to ensure the full participation of women in all areas of economic, social, and political life. In line with our strategic plan, we reaffirm the importance of promoting gender equality in all phases of peace processes. We reiterate the need to guarantee the participation of women in conflict prevention, mediation, and resolution of conflicts, and also in special political missions and peacekeeping operations. Finally, we renew the community's firm commitment to continue to contribute to collective efforts to promote gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls. Only in this manner can we achieve the full implementation of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Thank you very much.
I thank the representative of Brazil, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Oman, on behalf of the Arab group, Her Excellency Leila Ahmed Awad Al-Najjar, Minister for Social Development.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the All-Merciful, Chair, ladies and gentlemen, may God's peace be with you. I am honored to deliver this statement on behalf of the ministers and representatives of the national mechanisms on the status of women in the member states of the League and under the leadership of the Sultanate of Oman. In celebration of Arab women, we are here. We held a meeting on the ahead of this 68th session of the Commission on the Status of Women. We met virtually to agree on a united regional Arab position on the items on the agenda for this commission following the war crimes and genocide carried out by the Israeli occupation against women and children in Palestine. We hail and admire the Palestinian people who are resisting Israeli aggression. We hail the heroic resistance of Palestinian women against the colonial occupation which has gone on for more than 75 years. We once again call for an immediate ceasefire in the Gaza Strip, and we refuse and reject the forced transfer of inhabitants and call for the immediate access for humanitarian aid without any impediment. We call for the Israeli institutions to respect the resolutions of the General Assembly and the Security Council, notably Resolution 1325 and others, as well as the provisional measures from the ICJ, calling for Israeli authorities to take all measures to prevent incitation to genocide and to take urgent and immediate measures to enable humanitarian aid to reach the Palestinian people, and as part of the Convention Against Genocide. We would warn against and the terrible consequences of the lack of funding to UNRWA, and the consequences of this could lead to the elimination of the question of refugees and the dismantlement of refugee camps. We call for the end of Israeli military attacks on the south of Lebanon, which have caused great destruction in many villages and caused loss of life and injured, including men, women, children, journalists, and also led to the displacement of around 100,000 people. We call for an end to the Israeli occupation of the occupied Golan, which is increasing the suffering of Syrian women. We reject all forms of violence against women in Sudan and the neighboring countries, notably sexual violence, and we call for criminalization of this violence in all its forms, all forms of violence against women and girls. This is considered a crime against humanity, and the international community must put an end to it. We appreciate the efforts of Arab countries to guarantee a dignified life for women and girls and to reduce disparities between sexes in terms of income by means of integrated, comprehensive strategies and national plans to combat poverty. Achieving equality of the sexes and the empowerment of through the empowerment of women is an important tool to achieve economic goals such as eliminating poverty, strengthening food security, and ensuring social protections. As part of the joint Arab position in international fora and regional fora, at the end of the 68th session of the CSW, we have agreed to act together to strengthen institutions and financing to meet the needs of all women and to do so according to the following priorities: ensuring the empowerment of women, guaranteeing security and social protection for women and girls, supporting peace and security and the protection of women and girls from all forms of violence. Fourth, adaptation and mitigation programs to limit the effects of climate change and natural disasters. Fifth, the need to finance gender parity and the empowerment of women. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, we reiterate our concern to pursue efforts to achieve equality between the sexes and the empowerment of women and girls by means of programs to combat poverty and to strengthen financing institutions in order to address the needs of women and girls. I thank you.
I thank the representative of Oman, and I now give the floor to the distinguished representative of Tonga on behalf of Pacific Islands Forum, His Excellency Lord Vaea, Minister for Internal Affairs.
Honorable Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished guests, Malolele and warm Pacific greetings on behalf of the Pacific Island Forum, a regional bloc of 18 member countries working towards a region of peace, harmony, security, gender equality, social inclusion, and prosperity, where our people can lead free, healthy, safe, and productive lives. The 2050 strategy of the Blue Pacific continent, our blueprint to advance Pacific regionalism for the next 3 decades, places people at its center, particularly women and girls in their diversity. Despite the great challenges faced by the Pacific, including the stronger and more frequent impacts of climate change and disasters, high rates of non-communicable diseases, gender-based violence, and plastics and pollution in our ocean, we know we are a region of great strengths through our faith, diverse cultures, resilience, ocean and land resources, and connection as people of the Blue Pacific. We know collectively we can achieve our 2050 vision. Progress in the region. In 2012, our Pacific leaders endorsed the Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration, a commitment to progressing gender equality. Last year, 2023, our leaders revitalized this declaration to reaffirm their 2012 commitment. Aligned to the 2050 strategy, the revitalized Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration focuses on a broad range of priorities to create economic opportunities for women in their diversities and promoting the development of micro, small and medium enterprises to address poverty and recognizing those working in the informal and unpaid care economy, women and girls with disability, and women in rural, remote and maritime areas. The revitalized Pacific Leaders Gender Equality Declaration urges for new transformative partnerships and investments for the well-being of all Pacific peoples, particularly for women and girls in their diversity. The revitalized declaration, along with their key regional policy frameworks, provide an integrated approach to key issues that impact economic resilience, such as climate change and disasters. Key challenges and responses. While the region has made some progress, there is more that needs to be done. Climate change, disasters and their impacts continue to be our biggest threat, which causes poverty and leads to increased gender inequality. Climate change and disasters have affected crop production, contributing to food insecurity. In addition, shifting rainfall patterns and salinity intrusions significantly impact access to clean and safe water for consumption. Gender-based violence continues to be an epidemic problem in our region and contributes to women's increased economic hardship and limited access to income and timely and essential services, including access to justice. This is exacerbated by the impacts of climate change, cybercrime, and illicit drug trade. In some of our countries, women-headed households make less money and are more likely to experience financial hardship and live in poverty. Many women in the Pacific work in the informal economy, including the tourism and the cultural industry sector, with limited social protection such as childcare, pension schemes, and insurance. Many women often lack opportunities to access training, skills, and collateral and start-up finance. Way forward. Honourable Chairman, we must all work together for our women and girls in their diversity and call for support too. A. Target efforts that encourage the full, effective and meaningful participation of women and girls in addressing the impacts of climate change, crisis and climate poverty, including women's initiatives in the green and blue economy. B. Recognise the link between poverty and gender-based violence and the protection of women's human rights. We affirm that economic empowerment of women can be a catalyst for women's health, well-being and safety. C. Acknowledge that women and girls' economic empowerment includes innovative financing mechanisms such as our own very own Pacific Resilience Facility and gender-responsive social protection schemes, including those working in the informal economy. We call on all partners, including the UN system, to support the Pacific to implement the 2050 strategy and revitalise Pacific Leaders' Gender Equality Declaration to ensure that any investments and partnerships will support national and regional innovatives and guarantee lifelong learning, health, security, and well-being of all Pacific peoples in all their diversity. Your Excellencies, I thank you for your attention.
We have just heard the last speaker for this morning. The general discussion will continue this afternoon at 3 p.m. here in the General Assembly Hall. The first three speakers are Spain, Angola, and Laos People's Democratic Republic. The meeting is now adjourned.